As a quilt maker, a baby quilt is an extra special project to give as an heirloom gift. Now here at Kowalski Mountain, Philip and I are expecting our 4th grandchild. And the baby is due in March, and I haven't even started yet. It's time to get busy and get this baby quilt assembled before our grandson arrives. Now I'm going to bring you along and show you how I do it. Now the first step after you select the fabric is you launder everything. So this fabric has already been washed and dried, and that's to allow any shrinkage that might happen. This is 100% cotton fabric. And also if there's going to be any color issues. Now most colors are pretty stable. I won't say all. But most colors you don't have trouble with a lot of bleeding, but I want to do any of that pre-wash ahead of time. Now after the fabric has been laundered, the next step is to iron the fabric. Now this isn't my most favorite task. I don't even like ironing clothes, but in order to get nice clean cuts and straight lines, the fabric has to be ironed. So task number 1 is to iron the fabric. Now I was kind of sneaky when I was asking Jess about colors, because Jess doesn't really know that I traditionally make a baby quilt for a grandbaby. So this is kind of a surprise. Now I asked her what kind of colors she'd like to see for the baby's room, and she said that she was kind of looking at, you know, like browns and orange and some sage green. And I really tried to find some colors in those tones, but if you saw my last video, and I'll be sure to put it up here, I had a really hard time with those colors. So I ended up with a combination of green and blue. Now my personality likes things a little bit matchy-matchy, and that's really not your best friend for quilting. Quilting should have contrast. So it's always a challenge to create contrast and fulfill my need for things to match. So I've come up with a combination that has similar fabrics in both color schemes, and so I'm hoping it comes together in a really nice harmony. Now one of the challenges of living in an RV is I don't have a full-size ironing board. Now I just have this little tabletop ironing board, which makes it a little challenging when I get to this really big piece, the piece that's going to be the back of the quilt. I have a lot of fabric for that one. So the biggest challenge will be doing that piece. Now today I'm not going to need that full piece, and I'm not going to iron that full piece today. I'm going to iron just enough to do what I need to do today. My ironing board was sliding around quite a bit, so I put a towel underneath to help prevent that. And that's really making a difference. Now this is kind of unfortunate, this little white line, that's an issue with the printing of the fabric. So I'll kind of need to be mindful to avoid that when I'm cutting the pieces. Unfortunately, I didn't see it when she cut the fabric, because if I had, I would have asked her to cut that off. Now all of the bed quilts and baby quilts that I've designed, I've used a book called Around the Block. Now this is actually a new book. This is Once More Around the Block. And I had to order a new book because my original pattern book is in storage. And I was kind of panicking, telling Philip, we have to find it. The storage room is floor to ceiling, packed full. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to order a different book in the series so I don't order the same thing I already have. But it allowed me to continue with my project. Today's pattern that I selected is the ribbon quilt. If you missed that video where I selected all the fabric and the pattern, I'm going to put it up here. But that's the hardest part of the process for me. It's so hard to make decisions because I can't visualize it. But now it's going to come together. So let's get familiar with our pattern. So this is the ribbon quilt. It's a 3-unit grid. And the book is designed, it gives you a color illustration in the front, which is how you select your quilt. Now this is the pattern, and this particular pattern has a light, a medium, and a medium 2. And we're doing a 7.5 inch block for this baby quilt. So on the light fabric, I'm going to need, for pieces A, which are these pieces right here, I'm going to need 4 squares cut at 3 3/8 inch that are cut in half. And I'm going to need 1 square cut at 3 inches that's left as a square. And then I need for my medium, I'm going to need 2 squares cut at 3 3/8 inch cut in half. And then for my medium 2, I'm going to need a square, 2 squares, cut at 3 3/8 inch, cut in half. And the pattern tells you where to put it. So B, this number 1, is this center block right here. And then the A's surround it. So you can see here in the color illustration what that's going to look like. Now I need a total of 16 blocks for this baby quilt. So 8 are going to be blue and 8 are going to be green. So let's get started. I wanted my center star in the ribbon quilt to be a little bit bolder. So I picked these colors. Now remember there's going to be 8 and 8, so we're going to go ahead and start cutting these for the center star. Now when you're using this around the block quilt book, it allows you to rotary cut your block pieces, which is a lot easier than, say, traditional quilting where you cut each little square with the scissors. The rotary cutter revolutionized quilting as far as I'm concerned. So that's how we're going to use it. We use a cutting mat. This is a rotary cutting mat. We use a plastic ruler. Both the mat and the ruler have the measuring increments on it. We're going to go over how to do that, and I use my rotary cutter. Now, if you've never used a rotary cutter, I started quilting when my kids were babies, and I was always crazy. Whenever you're done with your rotary cutter, close it up. Never leave it open. And even though my kids are grown and giving me grandchildren, I'm still really careful to always close my rotary cutter. So, safety tip of the day. So let's start with the green. So what we're going to do is we're going to just fold this so that we get a nice, I'm actually going to turn my mat this way. And you want to fold your fabric as well as you can. Now my fabric is a little bit big for my mat, so I'm going to go ahead and fold it again. Now I do have a bigger mat, but it's really hard to do it on this table, so I make it work. So what I'm doing right now is I'm lining this edge, this folded edge, which I know is straight, along my cutting line right there. And you want that to be as straight as you can. Now what I'm trying to do is cut off this white line. I don't want that to be on any of my pieces because I don't want that to be in the quilt. So we're going to cut that off to make a solid edge. My cutting ruler has an edge on it, and that goes on the edge of my cutting mat to give me a little something to hold on to. Now I'm going to line this up along my yellow line, and I'm going to be sure it matches down here. I grew up with the motto, measure twice, cut once. So let's check again. I'm lined up here. I'm lined up here. I'll use my blade and I'll make my first cut. And I'm not going to move my fabric. I'm going to keep it exactly where it is. So our first piece needs to be 3 3/8. Now you're going to use your cutting mat. We're going to count. 1, 2, 3. So there's 3. Now, if you're not familiar with the measurements on your ruler, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So every inch is divided into eighths for my purposes. Now, for other measuring purposes, it does go down to 16ths. So we are going to do 3/8. So we're going to line up our ruler, 1, 2, 3, and that'll be the 3 of the eighths. We're going to count out on our cutting mat 3 inches. So 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to cut in the next space, we need 3/8. Now I want my ruler to be up on my edge, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and I want to match it on the other end. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I want to make sure that's lined up as well as I can. And if I make any movements, I just want to make sure nothing moved, everything is where it is. Now the top of my bar keeps it straight on my board, so I know that my cutting ruler is in alignment with my cutting mat because that ruler edge keeps it straight. So we're ready to cut. Let's check twice. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm ready. So 3 3/8. Here we go. And we've cut the first strip. Now I need to figure out how many I need. I should have done this already. So piece A, I'm doing 8 blocks of each color, okay? So piece A, I need 4 squares. B, I need 1 square. C, I need 2. And D, I need 2. So for 8 blocks times 8, I'm going to need 32 squares per color. So I need 8 here, so I need 8. 8 here, I need 16. And 8 here, I need 16. Now my fabric, this is folded in half, is 13 inches long. So in my 13 inches of 3/8, I'm just gonna count 4 for easy. So 1, 2, 3. So out of each strip, and there's 2 strips here, I'm gonna get 6 pieces. So 32 divided by 6 means I need to cut 6 strips of this color. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got 1. Now because of that 3/8 measurement, I'm going to go ahead and move this to an even place. It's best not to move your fabric once you have it straight on the cutting board because it's easy to make mistakes. But with that 3/8, that's really hard to figure out, at least for me. So I'm just going to reline it up so it's straight on the line, so it's straight on this yellow, and it's straight up here. And we're going to do that again. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for my 3/8. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And once you get familiar with the measurements, you don't have to count it out like that every time. You'll do it automatically. So there's 2 strips. Three. Getting a little nervous here. 1, 2, 3. I'm running out of fabric, so I just realized I made a mistake. I'm glad I got nervous. So I actually have 4 pieces here. Woohoo! Caught myself on a mistake. Thank goodness. Okay, so here I have 4 pieces. So I'm going to get 1, 2, 3 times 4. So I'm going to get 12 strips, 12 squares out of each one of these. Ooh, 32 divided by 12. Whew, I just saved myself making a mistake with my fabric. Thank goodness. This is where measure twice, cut once always comes into handy. That's going to give me 36 blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and stop with just my 3 strips, And we're now these rulers come in all sizes, and I actually have a smaller one, but I'm not sure where it is. So we're going to make this work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up. And I want to do the same thing we did on the big piece of fabric. I need to cut off all these little edges, so I have a nice straight line. So we're going to line that up. We're lining up here on the top line, and we're going to make this straight on this side. And there we go. Now we're going to cut our 3 3/8. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to pull that apart, and without moving it, I'm going to cut my square. So I'm going to line up corner to corner, and I'm going to cut that. So there's my first set. So I have a total here of 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So there's our first ones. We're going to stack those up, put them to the side. And we're just going to keep doing that. Now in quilting and building in general, fussing about measurements matters. If I'm not fussy now, I'm going to have problems later. So now I have 8 squares cut. Now I might be able to get one out of this fold. Let's just see. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I really need to press that. Now why do I not want to cut with this crease in it? It's going to change my measurement. It might be an 1/8 off because the fabric is not laying flat. So we want it to be straight. All right, one strip down, and here they are. These are the first set of pieces for the first 8 blocks, just the greens. And now we just keep repeating the steps until we get it all cut out. Now out of the same fabric, we cut the B pattern, which is a 3-inch square. And we need a total for each block, so we need a total of 8. So we're going to cut our strip, 3-inch strip. Now I'm lined up here, 1, 2, 3, matches here, matches here. This is an easy cut. Now I think, whoops, we got a little thread there. We don't want to pull those threads because that'll make a mess. 1, 2, 3. We're going to be really close if I can get all 8 out of this cut. So we're going to line this up. To make our salvage edge. Now I cut that really close because I want to try to get all 8 pieces out of this. 1, 2, 3, matches, matches. Oh, it's going to be fine. Because there's 4 right here. We need 8. Easy, no worries. 1, 2, 3. And I've got the strip. I'm going to cut the extra. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did 10. You don't have to cut extra. Now I started quilting, gosh, a lot longer ago than I'd like to admit. Let's see, my daughter is 30, and she was probably 3 or 4, probably 4. Maybe 4 or 5. She was in that age. So that means I've been quilting about 25 years. And I started quilting in a quilters guild at Fort Belvoir in Fairbanks, Alaska. Now, we were stationed at Eielson Air Force Base. We did a lot of things combined with the post out there. And one of those was I went to a ladies' Bible study out there on the post. And I got involved in the Quilters Guild. And I don't know how many of my friends, I mean, I still have some contact with some of my friends from that time. I used to quilt with Hannah Hunt. Hannah Hunt taught me so much about quilting. I can only imagine the kind of quilts that she makes now because she was so skilled back then. And she's one of those people I kind of lost track with. I'm trying to remember if Beth Sloan also quilted. I think she did. I have contact with her still. But there's so many ladies that I enjoyed quilting with. I learned so much from them. And I don't quilt often anymore. Really, I only do it for the grandbabies. But I learned so much from them. And I'm so thankful for those mentors I had back then. And honestly, I had more time to quilt back then than I do now. So if any of you ladies are out there that used to quilt in the Fort Belvoir Quilters Guild, that would have been in the 90s, comment below. I'd love to reconnect with you and see some of the quilting projects that you're making too. Now I was going to count these because I was a little worried that I didn't have enough. But my stacks are pretty even, so I'm going to be confident that they are enough. Now I'm not going to need that double layer, so I'm going to unfold that because I don't want to waste fabric. Now when you're buying fabric, it's so hard for me to estimate how much you need. And I spent 3 hours in Joann's picking out the fabric and figuring out what I needed. Now I figured out what I thought I needed by number of strips and inches, and it was a very complicated process. But you always add to it because you don't want to be short. Because I bought this fabric last week. I can go back to Joann's this week and I might not be able to find this fabric again. And I don't want that to happen. It's also better to get all your fabric from one bolt because it'll be the same color. If I go back and get more, it might be from a different bolt and the color might be slightly different. So it's always better to get a little bit more so you know you have enough, but it's a kind of a guessing game because you don't want to have too much because that's a waste of money. All right, so that means that I have all of the first pieces, A and B, cut out for the 2 colors in the blue and the green. So cuts A and B are completely done. Now I'm going to be assembling the quilt in Kentucky. We're going on vacations, perfect timing. I might actually make the deadline with this baby quilt. We'll see. We'll hope that Jess holds on to that baby all the way to her due date. So for traveling purposes, I'm going to put my pieces into Ziploc bags so that I don't get them all mixed up. So there we go. And these are ready to go to Kentucky. Now this will go in. All right, so the next 2 pieces, actually all the rest are going to be the same measurement, 3 3/8 cut in half. So this is going to be simple to manage. Okay, 2 more colors cut. Actually, I should label these. I'm going to label these bags just so I don't forget. This is my A pieces. B. C. And I have 2 more colors to cut. All right, these are done. So that means that the blocks are completely cut out. Now there's many more parts of a quilt other than just the blocks. We're going to do sashing and borders and all kinds of other things. But for now, the blocks are cut out. And when we get to Kentucky, I will assemble the quilt top. And of course, I'm going to bring you along for that part too. So here they are. I have the fun part about quilting, I've always thought is a little bit funny. You take big pieces of fabric, you cut them into little pieces of fabric, and then you sew them back together into big pieces of fabric. So that's where we are. We've cut to the little pieces, and next step will be to sew it all together. Well, friends, thank you for coming along while I cut out this baby quilt for our 4th grandchild. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that button and help our channel grow. We can't make our goal of 1,000 subscribers without you. We'll see you next time. Bye.